Welcome back everyone to Porterverse Workbench for week 2 of March Model Madness. Today we'll be focusing on my model of Stanley, who's been completed for a good few months now. Now Stanley has been a character that's been on my to-do list for models since practically day 1. I've always been fascinated by him as a character. I find it absolutely criminal that they underutilized him in later seasons, and they eventually just flat out forgot about him. Despite his disappearance into the void after a certain point in the series, much like most characters, Stanley has become a bit of a fan favorite for some in the Thomas fandom. Hell, the opening scene, "Welcome, Stanley!" has become a bit of a meme as well. Up there with the greats like Gordon's Snow Machine. Hell, even Bachman is making him now for the Thomas range. Now, as for Stanley's real-life basis, it's a bit of a gray area. I believe the Thomas Wiki lists 2 different engines as its basis, as he has traits from both of them, but there isn't really a definitive exact lookalike for Stanley, really. So I feel this gives a little bit of leeway for people to interpret how Stanley looks in design, which I have done here. As you can see in the model, Stanley is a bit different looking from the standard interpretation in the TV series. And there is a reason for that, and a new backstory for Stanley as well. Let's dive into Stanley's backstory in the Porterverse. Here we go. Stanley was built as an industrial tank engine, but one that was also capable of hauling small trains if need be. Stanley's life as an industrial engine was so boring that even he can't tell you the name of the company that previously owned him, as it all just kind of a blur to him. Whatever the case, one day in 1969, a crazily ambitious man by the name of Sir Robert Norby found Stanley, and he offered the jaded and burnt out engine a chance to start his life over, and Stanley agreed pretty much instantly. Sir Robert purchased Stanley from his previous owners and had him moved off-site. You see, Sir Robert Norby was planning a massive development in the heart of Sodor, an all-new preservation railway for all sorts of engines from all over the world. And Stanley was to be one of the earliest additions to the fleet. And he was also set to help with the construction efforts. As you can imagine, Stanley was ecstatic upon learning this, and proudly took charge of the project. Even more so while Sir Robert was away looking for more engines to join the new railway. Construction finally completed in 1974, and the Ulfstead Castle Railway was open for business. Shortly before the grand opening, however, Stanley was repainted into his iconic white livery, which he still wears today. Stanley will be joined by loads of other engines from all over the world on the railway, and is one of the handful of engines still in working order to this very day. Stanley's model was a fun challenge for me. Due to the gray area of his basis, I tried to find a base model or at least a chassis to work with and then go from there into the design. I eventually came across a pre-owned Hornby J52 for a good deal, and I figured this would be a good starting point. And I figured I can probably just use the model as is and maybe replace the cab with a different design. So I ordered the model alongside the base models for Barry and Jackie. Reason being is I managed to find all of them for really good deals. So you'll see their progress pics overlap a little bit. After receiving the model in the mail, I first tried removing the cab, but I discovered that the cab was molded to the running board, and the same thing with the smoke box. However, interestingly, I found out that the saddle tank was removable, which I have never seen this on a model up until this point. This is crazy. So upon this great discovery, I knew what I had to do. I opened up Tinkercad and got working on a new saddle tank design. Sizing proportions were difficult. I wanted the saddle tank to be a bit larger, but not overly so to cover the windows or anything. I also wanted the front to have that fat saddle tank look. I printed out the first piece on my 3D printer, and it didn't fit. The gap was too big, and the dome was massive. For the second piece, I lessened the gap, and I shortened the dome substantially. And the second piece turned out much better, and actually fit pretty well too. I believe it took a little bit of sanding, but it fit. After gluing it to the body, I got the priming. The primer was my homemade gray acrylic as per usual. After that, I brushed on the white. That was the biggest mistake I could ever make on a model like this. If you're unfamiliar with acrylic paints, the darker the color, the easier it is to work with. So black acrylic is very easy to work with and apply super smoothly, and white is the most difficult. It's very gloppy and honestly just feels like you're brushing on mostly dry paint. I did my best to make it even, but it still looks pretty rough. You can see some of the paint strokes if you look closely enough. This is part of the reason why I decided against weathering. After that, I did the lining in red with toothpicks. I then painted the dome and water cap in gold using gold Sharpies. I then painted the smoke box front and side rods in silver. I normally don't do this for side rods, but the bare metal color blended in with the wheels is a bit too much for me, and I wanted them to pop a little more. And so I made those out in silver, and honestly I kinda like the look. Might do this for more models, who knows. I then did some various cleanup work in black acrylic, and then I worked on applying the megaphone, which consisted of me spending hours trying to carve out the window with a very small screwdriver. You see, I completely forgot to carve out the hole in advance before gluing on the new saddle tank, and so this process was a huge pain in the ass. But eventually, I managed to cram the thing in there, and then I applied my usual matte clear coat, which did help smooth over some of the brush strokes for the most part, but they are still pretty noticeable when looking up close. But after that, Stanley was done. I am pretty happy with the overall proportions of this model, don't get me wrong, but at some points I would like to redo the paintwork. Maybe next time I'll try thinning out the white acrylic or use a slightly darker shade, or even just flat out spray it on. But for now, Stanley is happy at home in my model collection. I have a brief update regarding this mini event. As of recording this, the showcase video that was supposed to feature Birdie has been delayed a bit, unfortunately, as I want to showcase Birdie alongside my other non-real character models like Terrence, Harold, Trevor, etc. And a couple of those models are still not finished and have been a bit difficult finishing. So hopefully I'll try to have that little Porterverse Workbench special out by probably the summertime of this year, but I'll try to keep you guys updated on that. But there's no need to worry, as that slot has been taken up by a new model showcase in its place. Which model will I cover in this slot, you ask? Well, I figured I'd try to keep it a surprise. Just have to wait and see. Thank you all very much for watching this episode of Porterverse Workbench, and I shall see you all same time next week.